What's up, guys? Welcome to the Behind the Deal podcast, where we explore growth through acquisition. Whether you're a private equity fund manager looking to expand your portfolio or a business owner aiming to scale and build lasting value through acquisition, each of our episodes will break down the strategies, stories, the lessons that make acquisition one of the most powerful paths to growth. I hope you enjoy. On today's episode of Behind the Deal, I talked to Mike Bourgeois. Mike is a searcher. He is a veteran of the Air Force and someone who I respect tremendously. Young guy, but super knowledgeable. Has taken a pretty cool approach to the world of searching. He, I think definitely is wise beyond his years in the sense of his understanding of, how to focus in on the types of acquisition opportunities you're looking for as a searcher. And then, once you are able to acquire a company, what operational levers to pull in order to make that deal successful and make that company better. And just like anything, what I've found is, the simpler, the better. So we get into some of those strategies that, are pretty simple, but I think tremendously effective for him and his group. So I hope you enjoy this episode and, take a listen. Thanks. All right, everybody. Welcome back to the Behind the Deal podcast. My name is Joe Zanka, your host, co-founder, managing partner of Dealmaker Partners, who sponsors our show. Today, I'm with Mike Bourgeois of Sunset Coast Partners. Mike, what's going on?
Hey, Joe. Not much. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, man. Nice to meet you too. It's always fun having a fellow Boston guy on the show. We can talk about what's going on in sports. We can talk about the traffic as we did prior to hopping on here versus, if I have someone from California, I don't really know how to relate to them.
Oh, definitely. And this is good because usually my experience is most of my partners always give me stuff about being a Pats fan. So definitely happy to talk with a fellow one.
Well, I mean, and you can swear on the show, don't worry about it. But there's a lot of stuff to give at this point. I was actually at the game this past Sunday, and man, I've been going to games for a long time, and that was one of the most frustrating ones I've ever been to. 5 turnovers, but we had a good enough run where we can always kind of give it back to them when we need to.
Yep, absolutely.
Awesome, man. Well, look, I'm excited to dive in here, but before we do, I would love to hear a little bit more from you. Just a quick history on your background, and then tell us a little bit more about Sunset Coast and what you guys got going on today.
Sure, absolutely. So my background is I'm a 8-year Air Force veteran. I was active for 5 years, got out in 21, had a stint in private equity, turnaround advisory, and now I'm general partner at Sunset Coast Partners. We look at deals between 2 and 6 million in EBITDA. And our goal is really to become the preferred buyer in government contracting. So I think precision manufacturing, cybersecurity, anything government contracting, that's our goal.
Awesome. So did you feel as though, your background, being a little bit of a military background kind of morphed your thinking and can you apply it to what you're doing today?
Absolutely. I'll say that in 2 parts. Is it definitely brings a lot of discipline, a lot of process to doing search. At the same time, it takes a little while to get used to thinking a little bit outside of the box and thinking a little bit more critically to when you're solving problems, because that's what search is and running a business in general is you're always solving problems. So yes, I would say so with some caveats. Yeah.
Well, look, thanks for the service. I always have, tremendous respect for anybody that's gone down that path. And, I've seen it, firsthand with some family members, some friends, how it just, creates a lot of discipline within their life and can carry forward into, whatever career journey they end up taking. And we've actually had the privilege of working with some ex-military guys, in a more of a search style business. And I can just see how, that discipline, these, I'll shout them out. Bryden Partners. I don't know if you ever heard of those guys, but tremendous, firm. And, I've just seen them grow since we've started our business and they've started kind of around a similar time. Their approach, is just so disciplined and unique that I think it's helped them grow. And I think it all stems from, that experience they had, serving the country and being in the military and learning, again, those just disciplinary techniques.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And yes, I have heard of Pride and Group. They're great guys over there. I spoke with them a few times.
Yeah. Awesome guys. So look, government contracting, right? Talk to me a little bit about how that ultimately became where you guys landed, and talk to me about I guess your experience as a searcher when you started. You probably started in this space. You might have had a much broader criteria, and now has, after looking at deals, after kind of weeding out a lot of opportunities, have shrunken that buy box. What advantages has that given you in continuing to search and find opportunities?
Absolutely. So first, one mistake I see a lot of people make in this space is trying to be a generalist and trying to do a nationwide search. It's incredibly hard because are tens of thousands, if not millions of businesses out here in the US. So understanding first, what type of culture do I want to work with? What is a good fit for me personally? Is one aspect of it. With government contracting, usually you're working with a lot of prior military, so the culture and carryover is usually pretty good there and pretty consistent. The other part of it, and the reason why, is everybody at Sunset Coast Partners is a military veteran. So we have an advantage there because in the government contracting space, oftentimes, especially if you have a special designation or if you have say SDV OSB, it's a barrier for entry for other searchers to come and buy the business. That tends to drive the multiples down a little bit, but if you qualify for the business, you're pretty much the only person that sellers can sell to. Government contracting space. So Jed is an acquisition and ex-finance from the military. Joe, he's ex-CEO, traditional searcher, and also ex-Coast Guard. And myself, being ex-Air Force and with the private equity background, we feel that we're a pretty dangerous combination. And then also, just with the historic growth of the government contracting, and frankly, the DoD usually doesn't really get any budget cuts. And if they do, it's consulting. Think like Deloitte Consulting. It's not mission critical cybersecurity like the deal we currently have under LOI. So that's why we feel pretty good about it. So, for example, a question is, so I'll just say really quick, Doge is always an issue right now. I mean, with some of our LPs, it's been an issue because in their mind, they think federal government, we're going to get cuts. During Doge, nothing was cut from the DoD. From other organizations, obviously, what there was, but it just takes a certain amount of understanding of the government and the organizations.
Yeah. Well, look, I think you touched on a couple of really interesting things there that I fully agree with. I think shrinking that buy box to not only be not nationwide, so narrow down some locations, because at the end of the day, you're buying a company, right? And unless you have this national reach, you have to be pretty happy with, where that location is. You're going to have to travel there quite a bit, if not go live there. So you have to be pretty happy with that situation in order to wake up every day and perform at what you're trying to do. The other thing is, again, narrowing down the sector. A generalist, I think in this world of acquisitions, is incredibly hard to be unless you have you've made hundreds of acquisitions and have operating partners who... It takes an operating partner, right, to really run a business, whether it's the CEO of the business that you bought or whether it's, an operating specialist within a certain field. They need to be the one that actually are taking over and running this company because they need to have experience in that space. Who would you trust? A person who's been the CEO of a company in a certain sector for 20 years or right. Someone who just graduated college with no experience, who likes the sector but doesn't really know anything about it. You got to go with the person with the experience. And therefore you have to look at in a sector that you understand and believe in. And then you guys take it a step further with, having that military background, not only an understanding of the government contracts, but, having everybody in your team, that just has obviously helped narrow the focus. And I bring all this up because I think it does give you a tremendous advantage when it comes to finding the type of business that you want. It's like showing up at a car dealership and being like, I want a car. Well, we have tons of them. What do you want? If you go in there and you're like, I want a silver Ford F-150,
Right.
and I'm going to get it for under, $55,000. Like, all right, now you can go find that. And the chances of you getting it are much higher than just and landing on the one that you really like, rather than being, looking all over the place and not having really any clue. And I've seen and worked with searchers in my day whose search has, gone into the years, not months, but years timeline, because they haven't really been able to narrow down exactly what they want. So I appreciate you bringing up that point, because I think it's tremendously important, whether you're a searcher, an independent sponsor, or a private equity fund looking to buy a new platform company. There has to be a lot of conviction and a real why there before you start going down that road.
Absolutely. And you also bring up another point that it's really important, I think, to bring up, is that the space has become very saturated because you have a lot of influencers saying, hey, buy a business for no money down, do this. It's easy. In reality, it's incredibly hard. And something I think that you mentioned that's really well, it's kind of alluded to, is not every person is fit to buy every business, and just because that deal might pencil well doesn't mean you're a fit. So just on the location, at one point, the fund I was at, we were looking at buying a vehicle. It was a marine vehicle maintenance business in Alaska, of all places, in a remote area of Alaska. And
wow.
The fact that we considered buying the deal, because none of us were ever going to go to Alaska, was just a little bit. This was a few years ago, but it was just a really kind of, we're like, I'm going to go to Alaska and live there for a year. And no, it was an incredibly remote area. You'd be seeing the same 100 people for most of the year. So it was like, absolutely not. Great business though. But
I'm sure there was a huge moat. They probably were able to do something that, no one else could do because of that location. But at the same time, it's like, you have to understand that, like, this isn't something that it's not just mailbox money. Like, you have to, even though you might not be the everyday CEO and operator of the company, like, you got to get in the weeds sometimes. And getting in the weeds means going and sitting down with these people and meeting them where they are and getting a feel for what this business looks like. So yeah, location's important, man. And it's like, there might be an awesome business in Oregon, but I'm not moving my family across the country right now. So, I can't really look there. That would be a mistake to waste my time. And there's so much diligence that goes into, even before you make an offer on a company, you only have so much time and energy in a day. Your team, even though they might be multiple people, have so much time, energy, resources to really dive into a deal. And you got to make sure that, when you do go down that road, it checks a bunch of boxes before you even do. And that's another question I had for you. So you're evaluating a new government contracting business or an opportunity. What are some key attributes or red flags that you look for early on in a company that gives you some conviction that you should or should not go after a certain business?
So there's really a few different aspects where I'm looking at from. So one's the financial aspect, obviously, but beyond that, so I'm a big a value investor, and a lot of that and has actually carried over in analyzing a business. So, first, the initial pass is I'm looking at the balance sheet, financial statements, and seeing if there's any strange jumps, how that has been. So a big thing that I'll run into sometimes if a company is on a accrual basis is a lot of sellers that are a little bit more sophisticated might stop collecting, and that builds up their AR, and it makes it look like the revenue is bigger than it is. And so that's something that I've run into a few times, and that's pretty much, I don't think it's necessarily a red flag, but it's a yellow flag. So looking at the revenue recognition is one thing. From the operations, it's really, hey, does this make, at this scale and this size, really just having a conversation with the seller seeing what they're involved in. And I don't, and I'd suggest not saying it like, hey, like what's your daily involvement, because that might make them a little bit defensive, but having a conversation to where you really get an idea of how much they actually do in the business. Because in my experience, most sellers do far more than they actually say.
Right.
So it's just really getting from those two tenets, just really understanding what the sellers actually do and how financially strong the business is. And then just understanding, okay, in this location, in this geography, does this business make sense? So like, for example, we were buying a restoration chain and unfortunately didn't close, but one of the locations did 50% of the revenue. And the reason why it did 50% of the revenue is geographically, it was the closest to sea level. And that's where they got all their water damage work from, because with rain, those areas would flood. So just understanding like what are the drivers, the local area, how does that look, growth rates, everything like that. So it's just really looking at it from that kind of longer term view. I don't know if I could necessarily say my full process, because I don't think I've ever actually spoken it out loud, but those are just some of the things I look at.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's interesting you talk about like how you talk to a seller about their dynamics. And, sometimes it's like, they want to tell you how great their company is, right? And
Right.
part of that is how great they are as an owner. So in order to get the answers you're looking for, sometimes it takes like pumping their tires a little bit, right? And being like, hey, like, wow, it sounds like you built a business that, doesn't really rely on you too much. Like, what are you doing most of the time? And they'll, and then you could start getting in the weeds of like, all right, well, how much time does that take? Like, are you there 5 days a week? Who's overseeing it? And then they'll, that's when they'll start opening up a little bit more. But, they, it takes a little bit of that like nurturing in order to kind of understand the business fully, and
It does.
get the diligence that you need out of it in order to make like an educated decision.
So definitely does. So my suggestion would be to have a first pass to get that high level. Hey, what do you do in a day? What does it look like? But really start driving the questions when you're talking about that second layer of management, and then also your line workers, because you can pretty much map out what the owner's actually doing in a day to when you discuss how they're actually interfacing with the line workers. And you just map it back to what they say they do. And usually it ends up being more, in my experience. So I try to do it indirectly.
Yeah. And I think that's the approach that honestly probably works the best a lot of the time. Now, when you're talking to these owners about structuring a deal, right, and the existing founders and management team, I guess in your experience, what kind of deal terms, like whether it's equity splits, earnouts, anything like that, like tend to lead to the best alignment for you guys? I mean, there might be a different answer if you were maybe more traditional private equity than
Sure.
as a searcher, but talk specifically about how it works with you guys.
Great question. So with us, we tend to avoid earnouts. It's not that we necessarily dislike them. It's just in our experience, and there's a lot of really great books and studies on this, is we try to not complicate deal terms too much. So we're usually doing, in this environment, we're usually doing probably 1.5 to 2.5 terms of debt at the most, a good amount of equity, and maybe 10 to 15% seller equity, or excuse me, seller's note, not seller's equity. And we usually find simpler is the better, especially in government contracting, because it's not, I would say, a particularly hot market. I mean, there is a consolidation going on, but it's not like you're getting a 10x multiple on these businesses, right? So,
Right.
So it's really about simplicity for us and just being really upfront. And a lot of, especially when you're dealing with a lot of military folks, ex-military folks, they appreciate the candor, saying like, hey, these are the terms, this is what we're willing to pay, this is how that works. And usually they appreciate that. So to answer your question, modest amount of debt, we don't over lever. That does drive down the IRR a little bit from a business risk perspective, that works really well for us. Good amount of equity, and then the rest is just seller financing.
Nice. I like what you said about the simplicity. This is especially if you guys are competing with let's say it's if it's a proprietary sale where you're talking directly to that owner, the simplicity can make a lot of sense, right? Because they can wrap their head around it pretty quickly. At the same time, if you are in a competitive process where this deal is being banked, or they have an M&A advisor kind of running the process, and you're looking at it and you're competing with other bids, in my experience, even working on the sell side, with some deals, oftentimes the simpler one, makes it to the next round or is in strong consideration, just because of the fact that it's so straightforward, and if you're getting 7, 8, 9 offers on a business, and some of them have complex, earnouts, and some of them have, heavy seller financing, or, you need the seller to bend over backwards in order to get, they might be the biggest headline number, but they're bending over backwards to reach that. It's like, you're not trying to, who are you fooling here? Right. Like, let's just give us some straight terms. How are you going to do this? How are we going to execute? And, what amount of money am I going to, one of the biggest things they care about, especially straightforward, is like, well, what am I putting in my pocket the day I close on this business? Right. And what do I have to do in order to get my hands on the rest? And I think the easier the what do I have to do thing, the better, especially in your circumstance where you're buying like 100% of the company. Those are people who have mentally agreed with themselves that like they're kind of done working here. So like just get them their money in a pretty simple way, and let them move on at some point soon.
So you bring up a really good point, which is, I think, is really vital to this whole process, is you have to really understand what type of this person the seller is and where they're at in their life, and get an understanding of what their actual needs are. Because one, if there's any sort of transition period, you're going to be working with this person for at least a few months, if not longer. So understanding like, hey, is this the type of person I would actually want to work with? But two, understanding what their needs are. So that exact scenario happened for this deal we're currently under LOI and raising for. Is he had a lot of interest from a lot of private equity firms. They wanted to do these complex seller's notes. They wanted to do an earnout. He would have gotten more money overall, but he's like, hey, we're giving him the most amount of money up front. The deal still works well. We gave him a very simple transaction, and we actually got it at probably one turn multiple less, if not a little bit more, because we were just upfront with him and said, hey, we're not going to try anything crazy. So that works really well. And in this case, this gentleman, he's an older gentleman. He's ready to just step off and retire. If he was 15, 20 years younger, he might have been wanting to be CEO or the operator for a few years. And that would have been a different conversation. So it's just really understanding of where the seller's actually at and what type of person they are. So 100% agree with there.
Yeah. The mistake I see a lot of buyers make is that the earnouts like are reflecting. So I'm a sports guy, right? And baseball specifically, right? So, a player in their prime, might hit 30 home runs a year. But when they get to their late 30s, that power number usually falls off. And now, for the last 2 or 3 years, they've hit 17 home runs. And now these people, so they go to sign their new contract, and let's say a significant amount of the money that they could earn is based on hitting 30 home runs a year again. It's like that person isn't like, they're not physically capable of doing that anymore, nor do they like have it in them to continue to train like at that level to do that anymore. So it's the same thing here. It's like, when this guy is in his early 60s, sure, when he was 45, like if you want him to grow 15, 20% a year, he might have the vinegar in him to do that. But right now he's like thinking about his grandkids. So he's not going to show up every day with that energy and that passion that's going to allow him to meet these earnouts. So it's just kind of crazy. And I don't know if it's like a combination of them trying to like fool people or just being unrealistic. But I think sophisticated good sellers who understand where they are today in their life are going to kind of see through that stuff, and simplicity is going to win.
100%. And it's really just about, I think, just being, honest and true to how you actually are. Like, don't try and sugarcoat anything. Just be straightforward and direct, and just be honest about yourself. And a lot of sellers, that will go a long way. Other than you're not trying to come off as a a sophisticated private equity or finance person, just being like a personable. Usually, what I'm trying to say is being personable and just being like a normal person will go a really long way there too. And I think that's part of it. Is the seller building that relationship.
Talk to them like you're, getting a beer together, and not like you're their Harvard professor, right? It's just like, dude, tell me how much money, like what's going to get the deal done.
Yeah, 100%.
So you mentioned a couple times on the call, you're a value buyer. Once you've made an acquisition, what operational levers do you kind of prioritize to drive growth? Like what types of things are you pulling? Is it product development? Is it sales? Is it operations optimizing? Tell me a little bit about that strategy.
Sure. Not to sound like a consultant, but it depends on the business. So really it's, first off, you have to question everything that the current staff is doing from, hey, does this system make sense? And if there's a simpler and better way to do it, then you should probably do that. Usually it's just breaking everything down to first principles and understanding really where the business is at. So, for example, there was a business I was advising on a turnaround, and the biggest problem is they weren't tracking their vehicle utilization rates. And it turns out they were only using about 40% of their vehicles at a given time, and they were just wasting money on expenses and just selling off those excess vehicles. It's just solving problems, really. Maybe that's not a great example, but just going in and getting a holistic. Okay, good. So just going in and getting a holistic view is like, hey, these financial statements, this is what we've said, this is what we've shown that they are, but like, what are they actually doing? A lot of times, going in and day one, I'm finding out I have to restate the financial statements. Pretty much always happens to some degree. Levers, is the financial department, in this case, it's a larger business. Does it have the actual depth? Like, does it track more than just gross profit margin and contribution margin? A lot of times in these smaller businesses, and when I say smaller, I'm talking under $50, $75 million of EV, is you have business people and staff that have grown. They think that they're a large business. They're really not, and they don't have the operational depth or the sophistication because they've never been introduced to that. So, like, for example, in this business, it's run fantastically well from a compliance standpoint, but post-close, we're putting in some more processes in place to actually track what the bid spending is, the business development, how much revenue they're actually driving, and the KPIs, they mean nothing themselves necessarily. It's just understanding, okay, once you actually benchmark and track them over time, what's actually happening in the process. It's not necessarily a solve and end all way to solve problems. It just helps you and get an indicator of what's happening in the business. So putting those processes in place, and really, I mean, I think a lot of people, I don't know how much other people do this, but we interview everybody. We talk to every person in the company. Sometimes it takes a while, and just understanding like, hey, you want to get that frontline level feedback saying, hey, what is the thing that we should be doing? And because frankly, like, not enough people, there's a lot of disconnect from, say, the back office and what people are actually doing at a front line. And when you actually get that holistic view, you actually have to go and see and do what those people are doing. Now, in this case, it's cybersecurity IT. So I'm not necessarily going to be doing cybersecurity IT. That's not in my circle of competence, but just at least getting a conversation going so you can actually bridge the gap between what back office is doing and what the IT and the actual staff are doing, if that makes sense.
It definitely makes sense. I mean, look, you're talking about, if you were to like write these things down on paper, it would look like simple diligence, like, hey, yeah, let's take a deeper look at the books. Let's understand, truck utilization. Let's talk to the people about what they're doing every day. But those are things that, like, if you're a CEO who's owned a business for 20 something years, like, you may not have done any of that for like 3, 4, 5 years. Like, you may not have done any of it forever, where you're just like, you're just kind of going through the daily motions. Oftentimes I find business owners who are at that stage are mostly just focused on trying to win more business. Like, they think like winning more business is doing business. And what you're talking about is like, no, like, get to understand, what you're saying isn't like how traditional private equity is perceived, where you come in and you slash costs and you get rid of entire chunks of people. Like, that's not what you're saying at all. You're just saying, hey, there's probably a lot of fat going on here and a lot of like operational inefficiencies that only exist because you haven't addressed them for like 5 years. So like, let's just address them.
Yeah, well, that's really it. Well, I think it's because I don't know, and because I've seen that a lot before, and I don't know if it's just. I'm very much of the, hey, this business has 200 people, right? And at the current level of work, with all of this fat we have, we're only doing, say, 30 million in revenue. But if we actually optimize another 10 or 15%, we can handle more revenue with the same amount of people. So like, for me, I'm all about, why would I ever want to cut and make the company smaller when, if we solve all of these problems, we could potentially do more revenue with the same amount of people. That's the way I essentially look at it. Yeah.
And I think oftentimes it's very true, especially if, like, again, just creating, like, some of these businesses have good systems in place, but again, they just haven't been reviewed for a while. Different departments aren't working as cohesively as they could. And yeah, it's just, if you understand that, it's honestly, it probably opens up a lot of opportunity for guys like yourself who, like, once you do have an understanding of like everything that could be done within these size businesses that you're talking about, that kind of lower middle market, I'm sure everything that kind of looks like an opportunity to some degree, but you got to be careful about what you actually go after.
Well, the other part of this too is, if you go in and you just slash a bunch of departments, you cut costs and you change everything day one, it's going to create a lack of distrust with you and the actual employees and culture. And so actually going in and making people feel heard and listening to them and making an effort to make things better usually goes a much further way, because you build that level of trust. And that's another thing I feel like a lot of people don't focus on is how the actual people diligence and how the actual people are. I mean, I come from a finance background. A lot of people that come from a finance background just really focus on the numbers, but a business is really made up of the people. So doing that diligence too is really important. And I think a lot of people, really don't do that enough. And so they go in and like, they experience an entirely different type of attitude, culture, and it screws everything up. So like, that actually, one of my colleagues that happened to, they bought a manufacturing business, and he was corporate, like, hey, you do this, people listen to him. And, it was a shit show for the first 2 years because he was trying to understand how to actually work with people, So like, it's really important to actually do the people diligence. I'll also say that.
Yeah. Tremendous point. Honestly, people are the ones running the business at the end of the day. And like you've mentioned, sometimes these organizations have 200 of them. So understanding, what makes each one tick, but also getting them all bought into a plan that you're trying to execute is huge. You can't have dead weight, or people who are just like, don't believe that what you're doing is the right thing to do. You have to kind of work together, like, hey, these are the goals we're trying to achieve. This is the outcomes we desire. Talk to me about what you like about working here, right? So I can continue to do that. And then talk to me about what I could improve. And if you understand that, and you talk, like you said, you talk to everybody at the company, and there's signs on, hey, these are the things that these people like here, and these are the things that they don't. Let's do more of what they like, and let's fix what they don't. You're going to have a group of people bought into what you're trying to do, and who are ready to, ultimately business is also, not to sound cliche, but I mean, you're trying to win, right? And in order to win, you have to work together as a team. So, whether you're talking about the Army, whether you're talking about sports, whether you're talking about business, like everyone has to be bought into what they're playing for. And, you're playing to win. And the teams with the best chemistry, working the best together, are usually the ones that achieve that outcome.
Absolutely.
Well, Mike, this 100%. Has been awesome, man. I really appreciate your time here, and not only your time, but your advice and your perspective on what you're doing. If as I mentioned to you on the call or before the call, a lot of our network, a lot of our audience are maybe other investors, deal sources, intermediaries. If they want to find you and discuss opportunities, where can they find you?
Sure, absolutely. My email is michael@sunsetcoastpartners.com. Feel free to email me or contact me on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn's Mike Bourgeois. It's a unique name, and unless you're French, you don't know how to spell it. So it's Bourgeois. And any questions, or if anybody would like to connect, feel free to reach out to me.
Awesome, Mike. Thanks, man. We really appreciate the time.
Thanks, Joe. It's nice meeting you. Thank you.
You too.